Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. Welcome back to another weekly study. And today, this video is going to be on studying or how to study or the best way to study, depending on where you're at with the allotted time for you to get your test done. So some of you, again, looking through the Facebook group, some of you are literally a day or two away from taking a test. Some of you are just at the beginning of the process. Some of you have not gotten to any studying and you only got 2 weeks left to do it. And yeah, I feel your pain for sure. I do. Many of us have been there. This is not an easy endeavor. Although you will notice that sometimes as you're looking through the posts that are in the group itself, there's some folks who will come out and say, hey, I passed first attempt. It was a lot easier than I thought. All the way over to, oh, and by the way, the practice exams were just, pretty close to the actual exam. In some cases, students actually report that the practice exams were harder than the actual exam. Who'd have thunk it, right? All the way from there back to folks that say that the practice exams looked nothing like the real exam. Any number of the practice exams, by the way, are still in one sense kind of transitioning. We're in the 6th edition, of course, and ACE is doing 6th edition testing for the most part. But you may find in some older exams that there's a couple of questions here and there on 5th edition material. It's not the end of the world. Not much has changed. I will say that ACE did a great job moving from 5th to 6th edition academic accessibility, so to speak. It's even though it's, by the way, even though it's a thicker textbook, it's actually a lot easier to understand. The material is great, of course, and generally the feedback we get from students is that overall it's much more, again, what I call accessible, sort of academically, meaning that when you read it, it's a little bit easier to understand and comprehend. It's a lot of material. We get that, obviously. So as I go through the group and I'm kind of scouring through, every once in a while, I start to see a buildup of, I've only got 3 days left. Any tips, any study tips? Don't have much time to do it, or I failed a couple of times. Any tips on how to study? And that's what I want to go over and help you with a little bit, because at the end of the day, your goal ultimately is to memorize the material so you can pass the test. Now, what you do after that is entirely up to you, whether or not you use the information, use the materials that they've provided for you. That's entirely up to you. But, we want to help you actually pass it on the first attempt, or at least to pass it no matter how many attempts you've made. So that's why you'll notice I got a couple of things in front of me here. Look, I've said it before 1,000 times, either on videos or to students in live courses, things like this. Here's your guide. Now, yes, ACE does provide you with a study companion. Look, they really want you to know the materials and pass the test. They really do. Trust me. So they've got a study companion. If that helps you, fantastic. But at the end of the day, every question can be answered right in here. The problem is always one of, how do you actually study the materials that are going to help you to pass the test? And again, I'm like a broken record with this. Reading is not studying. I want to get that out first. Let me make sure we get this straight. Reading is not studying. You're going through the materials and you're reading through, and I'm just going to open up real quick here. I'm in the 6th edition. I just opened it up to chapter 10. And hey, look at that. This is about deviations. How many of y'all have gotten through this part in chapter 10? Just as a, for instance, I just opened it up and this is what I came to. So lordosis, kyphosis, flat back, sway back, scoliosis. How often do we see this posted? You don't get it. It's hard to memorize. And I know why it's hard to memorize. It's a lot of information. Most folks are simply not accustomed to this. It's not like you've worked in therapy, physical therapy, athletic training. For the most part, you've been working out, right? Isn't that why you did this? Because you work out, you feel great, and you want to help other folks. And then you get you get into this material and you're like, what the heck is going on? And so you'll start reading it because that's generally what you've been taught your entire life. You've been told to read through, and that's what studying is. And so I'm reading muscle imbalance and postural deviations can be, and I start reading, and I start thinking about what I'm having for dinner tonight. And all of a sudden my mind wanders, and I just spent the last 15, 20 minutes reading through all this material. And when all is said and done, I didn't learn a darn thing, did I? No, because that's not how you study. Remember, reading in and of itself is not study unless you're one of the few very rare individuals that can actually read material and retain it. Weren't you told that when you were a kid, right? Remember in third grade and fourth grade that, it's all about what you retain, not just about what you're reading. Remember? You got to read it over and over and over. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of do a reset with you, because again, I see it all the time, the frustration that goes into trying to study for a standardized test. We get it. That's why we try to provide all the information and the tools that you need. Look, I've got in front of me basically the three things that can get you through the vast majority of the material. The first one, of course, is going to be just this is the BDU Blueprint Study Guide. So basically, this is just a general study guide. Remember, there's kind of two things you got to think about when it comes to studying. You got to memorize the material, period. You've got to memorize the material. Let me say a third time. You've got to memorize material. And that's where the frustration comes in, is because if you don't know how to memorize, or your brain is not accessing and getting that information input in the way that it needs to, because your brain's different than mine, that ain't happening. You ain't memorizing it. Fact of the matter, you ain't going to memorize it. So what you have to keep in mind is that when all is said and done, you need to go through the materials, learn how to memorize based on your particular or unique learning style. And just learning style is just a way of understanding how your brain accesses information, is able to retain it, and then regurgitate it, for instance, on a test. The other thing is, what exactly are you studying? And that's what this is for. This general study guide gives you kind of I would say crib notes kind of scenario, where at least of all the chapters. And by the way, if you have the time to study, then you study through all 16 chapters in the 6th edition. However, as we see in the comments and in the post, not everybody has a whole lot of time to get their studying done, or their studying has been ineffective. And that's one of the reasons when you go through, especially in this, and you can download this this study guide, of course. It basically tells you, for the most part, the key testing materials and for each of the chapters. By the way, when you look in the very front, what ACE has done for you, by the way, just so you know, ACE has given you a breakdown of the different domains that all the questions are coming from. Again, is that going to be helpful? Yeah, in one sense it is, because then you're going to know what chapters to really spend the most amount of time on. Again, if you have 90, 100 days to study, you study the whole thing. But chapter one really that important? Well, you look in and you'll notice that in chapter one, it's not a lot of information. You're not going to get a lot of questions, just as a for instance. I'm just using that as an example. The other thing is, how are you studying, right? You see all this note paper. That's about as much as it's going to take to get through this entire textbook. Remember, read, write, and recite. That's the goal, right? Got to have a pen or a pencil. Read it. That starts the study process. It's not studying on its own. That starts the process. Now you've got to rewrite it over and over and over until you start to actually memorize it. You don't really have to think about it any longer. You just kind of in there in your mid to long-term memory. Use colors, okay? Colors, different color pens to write things. You don't have to write like a typewriter, with your penmanship. I'm very impressed if you have good penmanship, but the idea is that you got to at least know that when you're writing and rewriting, you're memorizing the material. So often what I'll do is I'll use different colors, add some visual interest, and actually makes it easier for my brain, for instance, to memorize the materials. And keep in mind, Quizlet, Okay, great study tool to help with memorizing concepts and definitions, right? And then the study practice exams, or study the practice exams, i.e., do the practice exams. I see this all the time, by the way, that students comment on, keep doing them over and over and over and over. You could, and that's not a bad thing, but there's a much more effective and efficient way to use practice tests. And one of the reasons we have practice exams is so that you can look at the material that you got wrong. So the questions that are on the practice exams are going to be similar in the material content, probably not very similar in how the question is asked. That's where you don't want to get confused. Don't think that you're going to get questions on the actual ACE exam that look even remotely like the questions that you're going to see on practice exams. If you do, good. So that's made that one that much easier. But for the most part, they're going to be the same material from the same part of the textbook. And that's why if you get it wrong, it's because you don't know the material in that part of the textbook. You go back to it. That's the way you use the practice exams. And yes, I've seen students say over and over and over, do more and more practice exams over and over. Absolutely, sure. Whatever's going to get you engaged more and more with the materials. But keep in mind, you have to determine how much time do you have to study, and what type of learning style do you have? Because if you don't have a whole lot of time to study and you're not studying according to the unique learning style that you have, it's a recipe for disaster when it comes to taking a test. So you want to know your learning style so you're comfortable, you're memorizing material. How much time do you have? How much do you need to hone in on the material that you have in front of you, right? And that's why for instance, a general study guide is going to be very helpful. There are many other techniques. I shouldn't say many other, but there are other techniques that you can throw into the mix, whatever works for you. But remember, our goal with doing the videos, doing all of the study videos, and giving you the materials and access to the other students, obviously giving you information, is to help you pass on the first attempt. That's what we're trying to help you to do. And that's why I thought it was a good idea that we do a little reset this week, and we will get back on track with some very specific study items next week. But here's what I want you to do is, if you have specific questions related to the materials, screenshot it if you need to, write it down and go directly to this video and make a comment. Okay. And just mention my name directly in there so I can see it, access it, and we can do a particular, unique study session on that. Because remember, if you have a question on it, there's only about 1,000 other students that also have a question on it, and be more than happy to do a specific weekly study on that as well. So I appreciate y'all coming on and checking out this video. Remember, we do have a YouTube channel as well that you're more than welcome to go and subscribe to. Just check out some of the other content that we have in there as well. So again, thanks for coming on board this week. Let me know if you have any comments or suggestions. Be more than happy to take a look at those, and we'll see you next week.